A great show today. Lots of different stuff. Going to start off with an old friend. I can't say that when we have women, and we have to call them longtime friends, but Gary and I are old friends. We've known each other a long time. He runs Executive Search Partners, and he sent over his background and get very thought-provoking stuff that he's going to talk about today. And so let's start with that, Gary. First off, I always assume no one's ever heard of Executive Search Partners. So go ahead and do that shameless plug and tell them what you do.
We're a nationwide IT-focused search company, mainly senior-level IT positions. We've been in business since 2003. I don't know, what is it, 21 years or 18 years, if I add right correctly, 19 years.
Yeah, a long time.
We've been recognized by Forbes as one of the top executive search companies in the nation multiple times, and hope to get honored again this year for 2022.
So let me set this up, then Matt and I will take these questions and throw them back and forth. But I was just before we went on air, as it were, I went live, I was looking at all your background information and how the pandemic has really changed what you guys do for a living, which is you're looking for top-level CIOs, chief information officers. Imagine some CISOs get thrown in there too. That would be chief information security officers. But for the techie crowd, they understand what this is, but it's essentially the man or woman that essentially runs the technology at a given company. But you're saying the pandemic's really made a bunch of changes. Let's start with that.
Well, let's start with sort of the fundamental difference between let's just do company A and company B. Company A views IT as a support service and a cost, and they're there just to run the accounting and the books and maybe some HR systems and occasionally a manufacturing system. But that's how they think of the company, and they typically report to the CFO. But there are companies for years that have I call it company B. They're the ones who've fully taken advantage of what IT can do for the company. And since we're in Detroit, Mike and I were talking about the difference between maybe the auto companies in Detroit and say a company like Tesla. Tesla embraced IT and digitization, if you will, early on, where everything they do from the car on out is tied together. So you have an app on your phone that you can request service, and if you need it, and they can then query your car and find out what kind of symptoms they have and maybe tell you what they need to do. And there's just an entire linkage there. You want to order a new Tesla, you do it online. You want update software information with the latest and greatest auto driving software, you do it through the online capability that the car has. So contrast it to perhaps a car company who continues to have the CIO report to the CFO, and there are still a lot of them in the Southeast Michigan area, and they think of IT as a cost center. Yeah. So what has happened is the pandemic, excuse me, I lost my train of thought because I got too hung up in company A versus company B. What happened in the pandemic is IT has proven to be, as I said before on this show, one of the heroes of the pandemic because they allowed companies to pivot very quickly. They saved people's jobs and lives by letting them work from home. And they saved companies by letting them pivot to much more of an online presence and a remote delivery of services and capabilities. And as a result, companies, and you see it in the stock market, found a way to, in some cases, thrive. What has happened as a result of all that is people are finally beginning to appreciate in company A, as well as even more so in company B, what IT can do for the company.
As sort of continuing that thought briefly, before I let Matt jump in there, is it's just the fact that companies now can work with anybody, anywhere, at any time. What I'm hearing from them, not maybe small companies, but the bigger companies, is that takes care of the H-1B issue where they can't get enough people to come into the country and live here and work. And instead, they stay in their own countries and they participate in this virtual corporation. That's what I'm hearing from a lot of people. Are you seeing that too?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the interesting side stories I've heard recently is some people who are working remotely are working 2 jobs remotely. Okay, maybe simultaneously. because they can. I mean, if you're working, I don't care where it is. If you can work with a company in the U.S. and then maybe a company in Europe, and you can shift your time zones by 6 hours, well, work 12 hours a day and get paid by two companies.
Yeah, Matthew.
One of the big changes that you talked about is that CIOs, rather than being more or less pure techies, companies are now looking for CIOs with a strong business background, with a sort of more of a management track record. Yeah. Talk about that a little bit, if you could.
Well, it's still sort of the role of IT is to help the business get better in a lot of ways, and that continues. That's accelerated. There's no company out there that doesn't. It isn't running completely on IT. You need a leader in IT who understands the company business and how technology can be applied to make it better, all the way from putting it into products to the supply chain, to employees, remote working, employee empowerment, et cetera. And but at the same time, I think the CIO also really has to understand who he's managing, right? And what they're doing and what their job is and what the trends are in technology and how the latest and greatest data analytics trends, for example, can be used to apply to a better decision-making in the company. But to do that, you got to have really good technology to bring in and store and access and manipulate your data. So.
All right. So characteristics, it's kind of covered on it, that this CIO person has to be also a great business person, right? Is that some of the characteristics you look for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the first questions I ask somebody if we're doing a CIO search is, tell me about a recent thing you did that you're really proud of. And if they come back and tell me about, well, I put in, a global WAN network using SD-WAN and some other terminology, I'm pretty much sure they're not the kind of person we're looking for. But if they talk about how they enabled a company to service their products because they got the engineering people to put the digital capabilities within the products to be able to communicate to the internet so that they could then tie it into their supply chain so they could then monitor the product. And if the product started going bad, send it to the service people, or the service people could then be on site before somebody knew their thing they were working on was going bad.
So how important is experience in the industry where they're looking for the CIO? Also, I wanted to know, how important is it to have a global experience rather than just American experience?
But those are two good questions. Let me answer the first one so I don't forget that one. The global experience, I think it helps to have global experience because, a lot of opportunities if you're not a global company. So I think that's a given. There's still companies, though, that are US only, and you don't need that global experience. Now, what was your part A, which I then forgot about?
Oh, sure. Experience in the relevant industry.
I'm sorry.
Could someone from, like outside the transportation industry move into a CIO role in the transportation industry, for example?
Yes, for example. So, it's really strange because let's take auto companies. Detroit's another good example, right? They've hired new CEOs from outside the auto industry, from the Boeing at Ford and from a furniture company at Ford, right? But I think that what they're finding is that people who really understand the auto industry are taking the leadership positions, and you have to have grown up in the leadership industry. And we're finding that in our CIO searches. Almost nobody that we've talked to wants somebody from outside their industry, because business knowledge of that industry and what's going on with their competitors is critical to how the CIO really performs in their job.
Okay, if someone is applying for one of your CIO jobs, what's the top hack that you recommend?
Oh, okay. Well, so if you're applying for a CIO job, first, we recommend the first thing you do is look at the requirements of the job and list for yourself maybe how I fit that position, all right? and start with, maybe I've had a responsibility of X number of people in a company this size that includes global. Then talk about maybe some of the successes you've had in helping that company become better in the industry. Think of 5 of those things, and then place those 5 success stories or reasons why you're a good fit for the company at the very top of your resume. So what people tell me, say, well, I got a generic resume, I just include a cover letter. And I say, how many people really read cover letters? And there are some, but usually cover letters, even if the first person reads it, don't survive when somebody sends that person's information on. They just send the resume. So put right at the top of your resume, here's why I would make a good CIO for this company. 5 reasons.
If you're worried about, if you're a techie who aspires to greater things, to aspire to a CIO role, how does a CIO go about getting the kind of business experience that you're talking about, in addition to their technical knowledge?
Well, I would say that no matter what IT position you have, whether it's a computer programmer all the way up to the CIO or the director of application development or infrastructure, whatever the position is, why does your job exist? All right. What are you doing for the company? Can you quantify what you've done in terms of one of 2 things? One, you can either talk about how much money you saved the company, or you can talk about how much you've improved sales. Now, sometimes it's hard to measure if you're a computer programmer and you're just making changes to a computer system, how did that improve it? But understand what that system is trying to do. Understand why it exists. What are the benefits it's providing? Go talk to the people who are using your software and hardware and say, how does this help you do your job better? What are the benefits of you having this system that you didn't have before you have it? Start thinking of your job in how do I affect the business from a positive side. And the more you do that, and the more you discuss that in meetings with people, the more opportunities you're going to get to move up, because people are saying, hey, this person gets it. They know why IT exists.
Do you see corporations encouraging up and coming IT folks to, say, take outside business courses, outside business training? There's a variety of ways to do that, but are you seeing that happening?
Yep. I still like MBA programs myself, and a lot of companies like those. If you're a techie guy, and which I had a master's in computer science, and that was heads down stuff. I actually designed computer circuits and wrote compilers. I mean, I was that level of detail. And when I got to Ford Motor Company, I started doing an MBA because I said, look, I got to know how this stuff's going to be applied, and I've got to understand how business works. I didn't come from a business family, so I didn't have that kind of inherent knowledge. It helped a lot, because I'd get into meetings and start trying to understand, why are we doing this? And people higher up started noticing, I think.
Well, I was just curious, Gary, how busy are you these days? I mean, we hear a lot about how the economy is doing, up, down, sideways. But I just wondered if you're an economic indicator, what's it pointing? What direction is it pointing?
Well, I'll answer that too. Our business is booming right now. It really sucked as soon as the pandemic hit in 2020, and it dropped to almost nothing. And then December of 2020 started picking up, and it's been on a roll ever since. Now, on a more micro level, I'm sensing the economy is in a little bit of a lull right now myself. Now, we're still doing jobs, but some are being put on hold of work that we've been doing. So I don't know. It's a good question, but it's been booming for the last year.
All right, we're coming down to the last minute. Any hot jobs you want to talk about that you're searching for a candidate to fill?
Well, we've got a number of senior level positions that we're working on. We're working on some managing director positions for a large consulting company. That's a partner level position. We're working on a CIO. This is going to be a hard one to fill for a company in the middle of Illinois. And we're working on a CIO position for a company in Los Angeles. Now, everybody who's listening to this is from the Detroit area. Do you have any CIO or senior level jobs in Southeast Michigan right now? And the answer is no.
Okay.
I wish we did. Wish we did. We'd have a lot of people to talk to.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. Now, if folks want to reach out to you or find more information about all this stuff, including all your tips online, where do they find that?
www.execsearchpartners.com. EXEC searchpartners.com.